on today.
OK， 今天我们所翻译的会在那个查经的这段会在 Zoom 里面录音。
Let's read chapter 17, verses 1 to 5.
来，我们来读17章的1到5节。书文你读吧。
Yeah, Shu and read.
设宴席满屋，大家相争，不如有块饼干，大家相安。仆人办事聪明，必管辖宜修之子，又在众人中同分产业。鼎为炼银，炉为炼金，唯有耶和华熬炼人心。惊愕的留心听奸诈之言，说谎的侧耳听邪恶之语。讥笑穷人的是辱骂造就他的主，幸灾乐祸的必不免受罚。子孙为老人的冠冕，父亲是儿女的荣耀。愚顽人说美言，本不相宜，何况君王说谎话呢？
到第5节就可以了。
Amen.
Amen.
All of us know what peace is.
我们都知道一小块是什么意思。
All of us know what strife is.
我们都知道平安是什么意思。
Some of us like strife.
有的人就会在一起相争。
I've known people that say, peace, peace, we want peace, but really they want war.
有的人我们会听到他说，我们想要平安，平安，平安，但是他们真正想的是想要征战。
People usually want war when they think they can win.
很多人如果他想要征战的时候，是因为他知道他可能会赢。
People usually want peace when they're losing.
然后那些想要平安的人，他们很多都会失败。
So verse 1 makes plenty of good sense for anybody who's at least 12 years old.
所以第17章的第1节，对于如果你已经超过12岁的话，他一定会让你觉得这句话是说的很对。
It's better to eat a piece of dry bread in a quiet place than to have the best meal possible with everybody fighting.
所以如果你可以吃一个干的饼，但是你是大家一起和平相处的话，好过于你有一个摆设一个很大的筵席，但是大家却在一起相争，吵来吵去。
King Solomon is not talking about a wedding feast where everybody's happy.
所罗门王不是在说一个婚礼，那每个人都很高兴。
He's talking about those big parties where there's strife and people are fighting to sit at the head of the table.
他在讲的一件事是说，在一个桌子前呢，很多人都在那互相征战。
Jesus he was invited to go to the house of Pharisees for feasts, big parties.
所以耶稣也曾经在法利赛人那边，然后有一个很大的那个宴席。
The host was at the head of the table.
所以那个管餐的人，他会在餐桌的前面。
His honored guests sat one on his right, one on his left.
他有一个很高贵的那个客人，一个在他左边，一个在他右边。
Then the next important guest sat next to those
还有一个很重要的客人也在他们旁边。
and you went down the line as you became less and less and less important until the seat by the door was where the last person in had to sit.
那么，如果最后的人他要来的时候，他就会坐在最外面、最边上的地方。
These parties were common in Jesus' day.
所以这样的宴会在耶稣那个时代是很正常的一个宴席。
So Jesus, he noticed every time he went, people were trying to sit as high up the table as they could.
Say it again.
People, when they came to the party, tried to sit as close to the top dog as possible, as top to the host as possible.
所以来参加宴席的人都希望能够更离那些主人更近的地方，就是更高的位置那边去坐下来。
They were pushing to get the honored seats.
所以他们希望能够坐在那些贵宾的席上。
And Jesus noticed sometimes somebody would come in who was to be honored.
所以耶稣也知道，有的人他们会来，他们也是贵宾。
So the host would have to ask somebody, please give up your seat for this honored guest.
所以那个主办人他有的时候就会问他请你起来，这个让给这个贵宾。
And in front of everybody.
所以他会在所有人面前这样说。
With everybody seeing his head hung in shame, he had to get up and give his place to somebody else.
所以那个人呢，就垂头苦脸的，然后站起来，然后把位置让给别人，很多人都看得到，就很丢脸。
And as he looked around for the next honored seat, they were all taken.
但是他再去找别的，给贵宾的座位的时候，所有的座位都被别人占住了。
And in shame and disgrace, he had to walk all the way back to the last seat by the door.
所以他就不得不很羞愧的走到最后边，没有人看到的一个角落。
Jesus said, so it is in life. This is how life is with you Pharisees.
耶稣说，我们的人生其实也是这样的。
This is how life is with you Pharisees.
这就是法利赛人在人生的一些状况。
You all are hustling and bustling, trying to get ahead.
你们都很强夺的、很强暴的，想要在最前面。
You step on each other's hands, climbing the ladder of success.
你会站在别人的头上，然后争取最高的位置。
Not realizing that your hands will be stepped on the way down later on.
但是你没有想到的是，当你回头的时候，或者这件事以后，别人也会踩着你的手或者你的头。
Jesus was well acquainted with Scripture. He knew verse 1 in chapter 17.
所以耶稣对圣经是非常熟悉的，所以他用了这个第17章的第1节，在他的比喻当中。
He knew what we all know. It's better to have just a little dry crust of bread if it's peace and quiet than to be caught with a lot of things in strife.
所以他知道，如果你有一个干饼，但是大家平安相处，好过于你 摆设筵席，大家相争。
Verse 2, we might not know much about.
第二节我们可能不太清楚，
Or maybe we do. It depends on our experience.
或许我们能够明白，要看我们人生的一些经历。
Nannies certainly know about this verse.
如果你是一个保姆，你肯定知道这个经节。
A nanny takes care of disgraceful children sometimes.
所以一个保姆，他有的时候会照顾一个再听话的孩子。
Verse 2 tells us that the wise servant is going to rule over the disgraceful son.
所以在第二节他说：“仆人办事聪明，必管辖贻羞之子。”
And it says they're going to share in the inheritance as one of the brothers.
是，而且他会在众子中同分产业，就好像他是其中的一个兄弟一样。
First of all, we're talking about rich people, not poor people here.
我们第一点，我们知道，我们现在在说的是这一家是一个很富有的家庭，不是那种穷人的家庭。
That's why a lot of people don't understand this verse.
所以很多人不明白这个经节。
You have to be rich to have servants, don't you?
一定要有钱，你才能够有仆人，对吧？
Poor people have to be their own servants.
穷人只能给自己来，只能够成为自己的仆人。
Only rich people can have a servant.
只有有钱人才能够，只有有钱人才能够有仆人。
Kings have always had nannies to help raise the children.
所以那些有钱人或国王，他们一定会有仆人，然后帮助他们去照顾他们的孩子。
King Solomon had many servants. Some of them took care of the children.
所以所罗门王也有很多的仆人，有一些是照顾他的孩子。
King Solomon knew about nannies. He had one.
OK， 所以所罗门王他也知道关于仆人的事儿，因为他自己也有仆人。
In his king,
他自己也有从小被保姆养大。
in his king's court, he had many courtiers who also had nannies for their children.
在他的王宫里面有一个什么学校，但是有很多的保姆，然后照顾他的孩子。
If the nanny takes good care of the son, he doesn't grow up to be disgraceful.
如果一个保姆把这个孩子教育得很好，照顾得很好的话，那他长大以后就不会成为一个不感恩的人。
And if the son turns out to be disgraceful, it's always the nanny's fault.
如果这个孩子长大了，一点不知道感恩的话，那就是保姆的错。
But we all know some children grow up to be model children, and others, no matter what their parents do, they just are a disgrace.
我们知道有一些孩子长大了以后就会变成很好的人，但是有一些孩子，不管你怎么教导他们，他们还是那些不知道感恩的人。
A wayward child is not always the parent's fault.
一个娇生惯养的孩子不一定是父母的错，
It's not always the nanny's fault.
也不一定是保姆的错。
Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the snake. We always look for somebody to blame, but maybe it's the child's fault.
所以亚当去埋怨夏娃，夏娃去埋怨蛇。然后我们每一次都会去找一个别人，我们会去埋怨的，但有的时候不一定是这个孩子的错。
Where did the book of Proverbs begin? My son, listen to me.
那我们在刚刚这个箴言的刚开始的时候，他说：“我的孩子啊，你要听我的，
Listen to your mama.
然后听你妈妈的。”
We know all about sin.
我们都知道罪，
We know all about trial and trouble.
我们都知道，我们会面对的一些苦难，还有我们有一些麻烦。
You know my sin. You know your mother's sin, Bathsheba.
你知道我的罪，你也知道你妈妈的罪，88就所罗门的妈妈。
Don't let your eyes get you chasing after women.
不要让你的眼目一直盯着那些女人，
Don't let your feet go towards wicked people.
不要让你的脚跟随那些作恶的人，
Don't take one step towards people that are evil.
那些作恶的人，你连一步都不跟着他们。
Maybe the disgraceful son was like Absalom, King David's son.
OK， 这个不感恩的孩子，可能有点像那个所罗门的其中的一个儿子。
Absalom was
叫
a
什么名字？我知道
Absalom was a stepbrother of Solomon.
OK， 他是所罗门的同父异母的弟弟的。
David's wives, David's children understood that sometime David's going to die.
所以大卫王的妻子跟大卫王的孩子都知道，有一天大卫会死掉。
They'll all get something, but who's going to get to be king?
他们都会得到一些东西，但是谁可以做王呢？
Do you think there were politics in King David's house?
你觉得在所罗门王的家里有这样的一些政治的一些事情吗？竞争吗？
Absalom was a stepson of Solomon who ended up dead.
其中的一个人，他是大卫王的一个什么继子，然后他后来死了。
Why did he end up dead?
他为什么会死呢？
He started hanging around with the people at the gate of the city, the leaders.
他开始的时候是在城门那边跟一些人在聚集，
He won their favor.
他是得宠的。
And he decided, if I don't move to be king right now, somebody else will get it.
他当时的想法是，如果我不做王的话，别人就会做王。
So he staged a takeover.
所以他就决定来抢夺这样的王位。
Does this happen in the business world today?
这个在现在的那个做生意当中，是不是经常会有这样的事情呢？
Vice presidents, stockbrokers, everybody pushing and shoving to get a little bit more.
所以那些副总裁啊，或者是那些高官呢，他们都希望能够得到更多。
So Absalom staged a revolt.
Who is Absalom? I haven't translated that word yet.
Absalom is a stepbrother. A stepbrother.
亚沙龙，亚沙龙，
亚沙龙
He's a stepbrother of King Solomon.
他是一个 兄弟，是所罗门王的。
He revolts against the king.
所以他是反对，他要造反的。
The king has to run out of Jerusalem. He's successful enough to drive king out of his home city.
所以这个国王要离开耶路撒冷。
He leaves his harem behind.
所以他把他家财什么都放在一边。
Absalom, to show that he's now king, takes all of the wives of King David up on the roof and has fun with them.
所以亚沙龙也掠夺了什么大卫王的妻。
This is how people show their power when they take over.
这就是他们有了权力的时候，他们做的事。
This is why when Jesus comes back, it's going to be tough on pregnant women and nursing mothers. Hello?
Okay. Sorry, it's okay.
Okay. So the disgraceful son might just be from his own actions, like Absalom.
所以你一个不乖的孩子，有可能就是自己的孩子，就可能就像亚沙龙这样。
And so the king trusts the servant to help
所以
control.
这国王他是他的仆人。
The king works with the servant to help control the embarrassing, disgraceful son.
所以他会跟他的这些仆人，然后一起去商议怎么样去对付这样的一个，就是谋略造反的一个孩子。
The world is worried about gold and silver. God is worried about the heart.
这个世界的人都会想到的是金银财宝，但是上帝所想到的是一个人的心。
King Solomon leaves the troubled world behind in verse 3 and reminds us that God judges the heart.
所以所罗门王是把这些财宝放在一边的，他知道耶和华是鉴察人心的。
The crucible for silver, the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart.
所以鼎为炼银，炉为炼金，唯有耶和华熬炼人心。
What got Absalom into trouble? Verse 4.
所以第4节，行恶的留心听奸诈之言。
A wicked man listens to evil lips. The liar pays attention to the malicious tongue.
所以说谎的侧耳听邪恶之语。
Are the people talking to you wanting war, or are they wanting peace?
所以有的人跟你说话，他们是想要打仗呢，还是想要和平呢？
Are they figuring out how to rob somebody or how to help somebody?
所以他们是想要抢掠一些人呢，还是想要帮助一些人呢？
We listen to lips all the time. Can we tell which ones are helpful and which ones are hurtful?
所以我们经常听到别人的嘴巴在讲话，那我们到底知不知道哪一些人讲的是帮助你的，哪一些人讲的是伤你的心呢？
We can usually figure out what's going on.
我们经常都可以知道发生了什么样的事。
And we say, what's in it for me?
然后我们会说，哦，对我有什么好处？
What can I get out of this?
我可以在里面得到什么益处？
How nice it is to find somebody who says, "What can you get out of this?"
有的时候我们也可以说，哦，那你可以在这里面得到什么样的益处？
How can you be blessed?
你怎么样被祝福？
The wise servant is serving others, not themselves.
所以聪明的仆人是服侍别人的，不是服侍自己的。
The wise servant does what they can to help the disgraceful son.
所以一个聪明的仆人，他就是会去帮助一个羞自己。
How else can you tell who is evil, who is good?
你还有什么样的方法知道谁是魔鬼，谁是好的呢？
Who is praising God, who is cursing God?
那你就看到谁在赞美神，或者谁在咒诅神。
There was a farmer back in Kentucky I used to go see all the time.
有一个农夫在肯德基，我以前经常去看他。
He was the most troubled man.
他经常都会有很多麻烦，
He needed Jesus.
他需要耶稣。
I would show up in his house. He'd say, "What the hell do you want now?"
我会到他家，然后他会说：“哦，你又来干嘛
Now, I'm just telling you what he said. I'm not saying to talk that way.？”
我只是说这就是他怎么说的。我不是要叫你也这样说。
And he would proceed to find something that he could damn, something he could curse.
他一定会找到一件事情，他可以去咒诅的。
He cursed his poor soil on his poor farm.
所以他在他的那个农场里面又找到一个什么事情，又可以咒诅。
He cursed the rain that always came too late.
他会咒诅雨总是下得太晚，
Or it came too early.
或者有的时候太早，
Or it came at the wrong time. Too much or too little.
或者下的不对的时间，或者下的太早太晚，都被他骂。
He was just cursing everything he could find to curse, including me.
所以他会找到任何的事情可以去咒诅、去辱骂的，包括我。
If he's asking God to curse his farm and his family and his property, maybe God honored his prayer with a yes. I don't know.
他既然这么爱诅咒所有的东西，可能上帝就垂听他的祷告，就让他所诅咒的事都成了吧？我不知道。
But if you really wanted to hear him curse, get him talking about the poor people.
如果你真的想让他开始咒骂的时候，那你就跟他讲一些关于穷人的事儿。
He hated poor people.
愤恨这些穷人。
He inherited his farm from his very good, hardworking family, his daddy, his mama.
他的这个农场是他的父母，就是很殷勤工作的一对父母来遗留给他的财产。
And he didn't know what to do with it, but curse it.
但是他不知道这个怎么样去整理管理这个农场，他只会咒骂。
And the poor people he used to have working on the farm, they were gone. He had to do it all himself now.
那些穷人在他农场里面做工的那些穷人都走了，所以他必须得自己一个人做。
Those farm workers he had were the dumbest people in the world.
对他来说，那些曾经在他农场里做工的那些穷仆人，就是最愚蠢的。
I heard story after story about how they were just so stupid.
我听到一个故事接着一个故事，就是说他们到底有多么愚蠢。
They didn't know which end of the hoe to handle.
他们不知道怎么样去，就是他不知道怎么样解决一些事情。
They didn't know how to hold a shovel.
他连怎么样拿一个铲子都不会，铁锹。
The kitchen help he had couldn't boil water.
他的那个厨房，他连烧一桶水他也不知道怎么弄。
I mean, they were just stupid poor people as far as he was concerned.
所以他觉得那些穷人、那些做工的那些仆人就是特别蠢的，什么都不会干。
And they didn't want a job bad. They did not want a job bad enough to stick around. They all left.
所以他们也不想再有这么差的工作了，他们都走了。
And that's just the ones he knew personally.
所以他只是个人的知道这些人。
The problem with the world were the poor people in it.
所以对他来说，就是这个世界的问题，就是有太多这些穷人。
Why couldn't they be smart like he was?
为什么他不能够像他那样聪明呢？
And he loved it when disaster came upon anybody.
所以他们都走了，所以这个灾难就也临到了。
And he wondered why he was having such a hard time.
然后他就是搞不懂为什么这么艰难的时候会临到他。
I suggested he read Proverbs 17, verse 5.
所以我会建议他来读17章的第5节。
He who mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker.
所以嬉笑穷人的是辱没造他的主。
If you mock poor people, you're mocking God.
如果你在嘲笑那些穷人的话，你就嘲笑上帝。
And if you gloat over disaster, you won't go unpunished.
所以幸灾乐祸的必不免受罚。
And he didn't.
然后他没有这样。
Let's read verses 6 to 10.
那我们来读第6节到第10节，好。我来读吧。子孙为老人的冠冕，父亲是儿女的荣耀。愚昧人说美言，本不相宜，何况君王说谎话呢？贿赂在移送的人眼中看为宝玉，随处运动都得顺利，遮掩人过的寻求仁爱，屡次挑错的离间密友，一句责备话深入聪明人的心，强如责打愚昧人100下。阿们。
Grandchildren come into the picture now.
所以，子孙就孙子已经在一个画面当中了。
In English, the children of the children are called grandchildren.
在英文里面，你孩子的孩子就被称为孙子，孙子辈。
Nannies and parents have to raise up the child in the way he should go.
保姆跟父母要教养一个孩子，让他成为他应该成为的样子。
The grandparents just get to love on the grandchildren.
但是祖父母呢，他们只是爱这些孙子。
If they turn into troublemakers, you can send them back to their parents.
如果这些孩子开始犯错误的时候，你就可以直接把他又送回到他父母那边。
You can call the parents to come pick them up and take them home.
你可以打电话叫你的儿女来把他们接走。
If they're old enough, you can say, go catch a subway home. I'm busy right now. I'm done.
如果他们长得大一点了，你可以告诉他啊，你就坐地铁回家吧，我可以走了，你就赶紧走吧。
Or maybe if you're poor, you can say, I'm done. Go see your parents in the next room.
或许你很穷，那你跟他们说啊，你就回家吧，你家就他就住在隔壁。
But how many grandparents tell their children that? Nobody does.
但是有没有这个祖父母这么做呢？其实没有。
Children's children are a pride, a crown to the aged people. We love our grandchildren.
所以子孙是老人的冠冕，我们都非常爱我们的孙子。
Grandchildren can do no wrong, can they?
所以这些孙子辈的小孩子，他们是不是都不会犯错的？
Grandchildren can find nothing wrong with their grandchildren. Grandparents cannot find anything wrong with their grandchildren.
所以做爷爷奶奶的，从来都不会发现他的孙子做错了什么事儿。
Grandmama was at the house when the plumber came to fix the toilet. This is a story.
Okay, grandma what?
Grandmother was in charge of the grandson when the plumber came to fix the toilet.
OK， 有一个奶奶在带她的孙子，然后这个时候呢，有个水喉工来修厕所。
The plumber laid out all of his tools and began to work.
那这个水喉工就把他的这些工具都放好，都放在一边儿，然后开始工作。
Johnny, the little grandson, came in, picked up his screwdriver, and threw it into the commode, into the toilet.
还有一个小孙子，他的名字叫 Johnny， 他就拿了一个螺丝刀，然后就丢进马桶里。
The plumber didn't get mad. He just says, that's cute, and reached in and got his screwdriver.
那这个水喉工也没有生气，他就说：“哦，这你挺可爱的这孙子。”然后就把那个螺丝刀又拿出来了。
So Johnny picked up the hammer and threw the hammer into the toilet.
然后那小孙子 Johnny 又把那个锤子又给丢进去了。
The plumber didn't get mad. He reached in, got his hammer, dried it off also.
然后这水喉工还是没有生气，他就把锤子又拿出来了。
The grandmother looked in and said, oh, isn't Johnny so cute? Isn't he so lovable?
然后呢，奶奶就过来说：“啊，你看我的孙子这 Johnny 多可爱啊！”
The plumber said, yes, ma'am, he is very lovable. He's like my own child.
然后呢，水喉工说：“对呀，他是真的是很可爱啊，他就像我自己的孩子一样。”
And I can either fix your toilet or babysit Johnny.
他说：“我可以，要么就帮你修水喉，要么就帮你那个，干脆就是当那个带你的孙子 Johnny 就好了。”
But I can tell you I charge $80 an hour whether I'm fixing your toilet or babysitting your child.
但是我可以告诉你一件事，我每个小时是80块钱，不管我做什么，也可以带孩子，也可以修马桶。
And I'm happy to be a nanny at $80 an hour. Take your pick.
而且我很高兴，我很高兴，我可以带你的孙子就像保姆一样，然后反正我也反正我的1小时也是80块钱。
Grandchildren are such a blessing to grandparents.
所以孙子是上帝对我们的。
And look at the next part of that verse.
那我们来看下一句经节。
Parents are the pride of their children.
所以父亲是儿女的荣耀。
How many children do you know who go around saying, man, my parents are the best people in the world?
你有没有听过有的人会跟你说，我爸妈是世界上最棒的。
They might say that when they're 5 or 6 years old.
他们可能会这样说，当他们5、6岁的时候。
My daddy's stronger than your daddy.
我爸爸比你爸强多了，强壮。
My daddy is richer than your daddy.
我爸爸比你爸有钱。
My mama's smarter than your mama.
我妈妈也比你聪明。
But try listening to the teenagers, Reverend Wadsworth.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. Teenagers don't talk that way about their parents, do they?
所以这些青年人，他们不会这样说他的父母。
But King Solomon says that grandchildren are the blessing of the aged.
所以所罗门王说，子孙为老人的冠冕。
And parents should be the pride of their children.
然后父亲是儿女的
When
儿
children
女的荣耀。
when children honor their parents, they live long in the land.
当一个儿女他可以荣耀他的父母的时候，他可以在这个土地上更长寿。
So if you move on to verse 8, what do we find King Solomon talking about now?
如果我们去看到第8节，我们可以看到所罗门王说的是什么？
But we first have to look at verse 7.
而我们要先看第7节。
Arrogant lips are not suited to a fool.
愚顽人说美言，并不相宜。
When a fool talks arrogantly, it's sad, isn't it?
所以，如果那些很愚蠢的人，他们说了很美的美言，好像听起来特别不合意。
There was a man who once told me that the earth was flat.
有一个人曾经告诉过我，这个世界是平的。
He was an old man. He really believed it.
他是一个老年人，他真的相信这个世界是平的。
I learned real quick not to argue with people like that.
我学得很快，我知道不要去跟这样的人去争吵。
He was so arrogant telling me that I was a fool to think the earth was round.
然后他就是用那样的口气，然后说，觉得我为什么会觉得说这个世界是圆的？
People told me before I went. Now, he's a fool. He thinks the earth is flat. I was warned.
所以我去他家之前，别人已经告诉过我了，他就是认为他是愚昧的，他就认为这个世界是平的。
They had heard his testimony.
他们都听过他的见证。
How much worse is it lying lips to a ruler?
所以这个君王说谎话到底是什么样的？
I think that the ruler on the Zoom needs to pin the right picture to the screen. You don't need to quote that.
对
A ruler has to tell the truth.
所以一个君王一定要说真话。
The ruler has to tell the truth because people believe the ruler.
所以君王一定要说真话，因为很多人都相信君王所讲的话。
He goes on to talk about a bribe that is a charm to the one who gives it. Wherever he turns, he succeeds.
所以他在这里说，贿赂在移送的人眼中看为宝玉。
Isn't that bad? Aren't bribes supposed to be bad?
所以贿赂是不是就是坏的呢？
But it works like a charm for the one who gives it.
但是在移送的人眼中却看为宝玉。
Wherever he turns, he succeeds.
所以不管去到哪里，随处运动都得胜利。
That's how it works with bribes.
所以贿赂的事情就是这样的，就是这么运行的。
Some people accept bribes. They're happy to get a little extra.
那有的人还喜欢受到贿赂，他们希望得到更多的东西。
But any ruler who's trying to run a country knows that bribes are corruption. They're bad.
任何一个君王他都知道，这种贿赂是不好的。
But they're hard to get rid of because everywhere the bribe goes, people accept it.
但是很难阻止这些贿赂的事情，因为你到处都有人在贿赂，而且就是大家都就把事情可以做得很顺利。
But King Solomon has said bribes will destroy a nation.
但是所罗门王曾经说，这种贿赂可以毁坏一个国家。
But they're so attractive.
What?
They are so attractive. They're so nice.
所以，但是这些事情对人来讲是很有吸引力的。
People accept them all the time.
所以很多人经常都会受到贿赂。
So King Solomon goes on to verse 9. He says, he who covers an offense promotes love.
所以所罗门在第九节说，掩盖人过的寻求人爱。
Love covers a multitude of sins.
所以爱可以遮盖一切。
And what destroys friendship?
那么什么会离间密友呢？
Whoever repeats the matter separates close friends.
所以屡次挑错的离间密友。
What are you repeating? What is the matter you are repeating?
所以你为什么一定要屡次挑错呢？有什么这样的事情让你可以屡次挑错呢？
Somebody else's offense, somebody else's mistake.
所以你总会去挑别人的错，别人做错的事情。
If you want to separate close friends, just start talking about the bad things that they do.
所以，如果你要是挑起事端的话，你只要去挑他们做错的事儿。
Verse 10, we read, a rebuke impresses a man of discernment.
第10节，我们看到一句责备话，深入聪明人的心。
Some people cannot take correction.
有的人就没有办法接受别人的批评。
How dare you talk to me like that? How dare you talk to me like that?
你怎么可以
Who
你怎
gives
么
you
可以对我这样说话呢？
who gives you the right to tell me I'm doing something wrong?
谁给你这样的权利，告诉你让说我做错了呢？
Sometimes the rebukes we remember were way back in childhood days. Somebody rebuked us 50 years ago.
所以有的责备的话是已经回到了50年前的事。
Somebody told us 50 years ago we were no good.
有的人会告诉我说，有的人会告诉你说，哦，50年前你怎么不好。
Somebody cheated us a long time ago, 20 years ago.
有的人可能骗了我们，骗了很多年。
We got rebuked 20 years ago. Somebody told us we messed up.
所以20年前发生的一些过犯，别人也会说，哦，都是你做错了。
And it still eats away at our heart.
所以这样的事情还在我们的心里面来，让我们心里难过。
And we'll keep on telling that terrible story about what happened again and again.
然后我们会一直在重复的这样的故事，然后一直在说，
Until somebody finally hears us.
直到有的人听到我们讲的，
And tells us, yes, that was terrible.
然后告诉我们说，哎呀，你说的对呀，那件事真是不对。
What happened to you was sinful. It was wrong.
发生在你身上的那个事真的是不应该的。
And it's still eating away at your heart.
到现在这件事情还在吞噬你的心。
Unless you forgive, it will continue to destroy you.
所以，除非你能够学会原谅，否则的话，它还会让你觉得被吞噬。
But by offering forgiveness, you will be healed.
但是如果你愿意被饶恕的话，你可以被，就是如果你愿意的话，也可以被饶恕。
You are the one beating yourself up with 100 lashes again and again.
因为是你自己强如责打，就是好像你自己被鞭打了100下一样。
So we ask God to help us forgive and forget.
所以我们由上帝来饶恕我们，也让我们能够忘记这个事。
A rebuke impresses the man of discernment. More than 100 lashes does anything to a fool.
所以一句责备话深入聪明人的心，强如责打愚昧人100下。
Let's look at verse 11.
我们看看第11节。
An evil man is bent only on rebellion.
所以恶人只寻背叛，
A merciless official will be sent against him.
所以必有严厉的使者奉差攻击他。
It's better to meet a bear robbed of his cubs than a fool in his folly.
That I don't know what to say.
Verse 12, read verse 12.
OK 宁可遇第12节，宁可遇见丢崽子的母熊，不可遇见正行愚妄的愚昧人。
In verse 13, if a man pays back evil for good, evil will never leave his house.
所以13节，以恶报善的祸患必不离他的家。
Let us pray.
我们祷告。